Hello, everyone. Welcome to reading class on this fine Wednesday. Hopefully, it's fine. I'm recording this on Tuesday, but I think it was supposed to get pretty warm later this week, so we'll call it a fine Wednesday. We're going to pick up in chapter 10 and just talk about what you read and the vocab words. Don't forget to keep practicing these every day. Often that'll be a step 3 for you to do some kind of practice to keep them fresh in your mind. We're going to head to page 68 or 86, the reverse of that, if you have the white book, so 68. Exempted is in rule number 3 for his new job on page 68. Okay, it says, from this moment on, you are exempted from rules governing rudeness. You may ask any questions of any citizen, and you will receive an answer. So, exempted means so Jonas now in his job. I should give the context first, right? Has all these specific rules, and one of the rules is that he's exempted from having to not be rude, and he's exempted from having to not be able to ask questions. Okay, exempted means he's excused from something, or you could even say he's free from something. He doesn't have to do it. So if someone came to me today and said, "Mr. Gurgle, you're exempted from having to pay taxes this year," woohoo! I'd be exciting. I'm free from having to do it. Jesus' death exempted us from the punishment for our sins. We're free from it, right? So Jonas is exempted from that rule that says you can't ask questions of other people, which was one of the rules of the community, right? And he gets to do that. He can even be rude to people as he asks questions and things like that. You'll see why he's able to do that and why that's allowed for him in future chapters. All right, very next page, requisitioned. If you're in the white book, let's see, that's on page 88. Okay, so a couple pages later. Requisitioned is literally in the last sentence on page 69 if you got the black book. It says, when he had crushed his finger in the door, he had quickly, gasping into the speaker, notified his mother, and she had hastily requisitioned some relief of pain medication, which had been promptly delivered to his dwelling. So this is the part where he thinks to the fact that he's not allowed to use medicine, at least for his job anymore, right? And he's worried about that because he remembers a time where he hurt his finger, and then he requisitioned medicine, and it got delivered very quickly. Requisition just means he asked for it. To requisition means asked for something, or asked for it, or demanded it. So asked or demanded medication, and it was quickly brought to him, and he felt better, right? He's worried because now, for his job purposes at least, he's not allowed to take medication. All right, page 74, and if you're in the white book, let's see, that'll be page 94, okay? 74. Conspicuous is almost right in the center of the page. Someone might say the word conspicuous is being conspicuous. If you look in the middle, you'll see it easily. Ahem. Maybe that's a meaning. So it says, but the most conspicuous difference was the books. In his own dwelling, there was only necessary reference volumes, dictionaries and the like, right? So he steps into the giver's home, right? The receiver's home that he's going to work with in the annex, that little building behind the old people's home. That's where he works now, right? And one of the first things he sees is all these books. He's not used to that, right? Because he grew up in a house and he's really never been exposed to books. That's one of the things that they don't really have in this community, right? That they're controlling because they don't want people to read bad or different things in different books, right? And so that's new to him. He notices it right away. Conspicuous means easily noticed or easy to see. So when he stepped into the giver's house, the receiver's house, the guy he was going to be training under, he noticed right away, couldn't miss it, the books. It was conspicuous. All right, let's talk about what you read in chapter 10. It said, what were 2 unusual things that happened or that Jonas noticed shortly after arriving at the place where he would work, the annex? First of all, he noticed the books, right? That was unusual. He had never seen so many books before. And the way the lady, the receptionist lady, treated him, with respect. She stood up for him and treated him with honor, and that's just not something he was used to, right? He noticed the furniture and how fancy it was. In their community, in the normal houses, they weren't allowed fancy furniture, right? There were some fancy curved tables and chairs and a fancy quilt on a bed and all that, right? That was different than what he was used to. What was the most conspicuous thing he saw? Well, we already talked about number 2, the books, right? What was so amazing to Jonas about them? He had never seen so many books before, right? That was just something he was not used to. What did the current receiver say about how old he was? That he looks way older than he actually is. You know, when you're stressed, you actually age your body faster. When you're stressed, your body releases this hormone, this chemical, that makes your body beat its heart faster and makes you feel all kind of up and tight, right? That God designed our bodies to work that way because, if there is a really dangerous situation, we can react quicker, right? But the problem is those chemicals get released if we're just stressed about something, whether that be school or an argument we had with a family member, right? And so then our body releases all those chemicals, which are really hard on our cells. They make our cells age faster. And so sometimes if we're really stressed all the time, we can look older than we really are. That happens to presidents. Almost every president. Think of like President Obama, our most recent one before President Trump. He went in looking like a really young guy. And only 8 years later, when he was done, he had gray hair, even before most people get gray hair. That's a stressful job, right? So the receiver looked a lot older than he really was. And to Jonas, that had to be a uh-oh moment, right? Is that going to happen to me too? What would the current receiver be sharing with Jonas? Memories of the world in the past before the community, all the things that the community wasn't allowed to know, right, or understand. That's going to be shared with him. He's the receiver of memories, right? What made Jonas terribly concerned for the current receiver? The receiver mentioned that he was, on page 78 in the Black Book at least, that he was really weighted by all these memories and wisdom, and it just made him feel, breathe deeply and just look like he was almost depressed. And so that really concerned Jonas in number 5. Number 6, what were some things that Jonas did not know anything about? List at least 2. He had no idea what a sled was or what snow was or things like that, right? He had no idea because those kind of things aren't allowed in the community, right? So that's kind of funny that he doesn't know what basic things are. He didn't even know what the word downhill meant because their community was kept as this perfectly flat, place that looks all the same, right? And so all these things that Jonas has never been told about in this community because this community hides stuff like that. And then what did the receiver do to Jonas at the end and why? This seemed a little bit weird at first, but it'll make more sense as you go into the next chapter. I'm just going to let you know that. But the receiver had Jonas take his shirt off and lay down on the bed. And then the other receiver who's training him is going to place his arms on Jonas's back and give him a memory. Now, remember, I told you when this book began that it was kind of a science fiction book, right? Things are going to be possible that aren't really truly possible in real life. And so one of the things that's going to be possible that you'll see, without giving away too much, is that when this receiver touches the back of Jonas, he's able to make memories go from his brain to Jonas's brain. You'll see how that works. It's going to be interesting. So that's what he's doing. It's nothing wrong or anything like that that's going on. It's just him touching Jonas's back so that the memories can transfer from this guy to Jonas. And you'll see what happens and how Jonas reacts to some of those memories that he gets. So that's what's going on in chapter 10. Hopefully you're finding that interesting. I want to talk about our new reading concept or skill for this book, one of the new ones that we're doing, and that's cause and effect. A cause is a big event that takes place or a choice that someone makes. An effect is what happens because of that event or that choice. Here's some examples of what I mean by that. Think of the example of a tornado, right? That would be a big event, a big cause. Okay, and what are some effects of that? Well, our own city of St. Peter in 1998, I believe the year was, experienced a big event of a tornado, right? And what were some of the effects? Well, think of some of the things like damage, right? Broken houses, lost homes. There was even, I think, a couple of deaths, or at least one death that was caused by that, right? Those are some of the effects that this thing caused, right? Okay, so that's cause and effect, one example. Here's another example from our book. The cause. Jonas chooses to spend his volunteer hours at many different places rather than focusing on just one. What effect did that have on Jonas? Let you think for a second. So maybe you're saying to yourself, well, then he didn't know what job he would get, right? Because he spread himself out so much and chose a different place so many different days, unlike some of his friends who kind of volunteered at the same place again and again and again. The effect was that when the job assignment day came, he had no idea what they were going to pick him for. So cause, a choice or event, right? And the effect is what happened because of that. Here's another example. Cause. Jonas has only seen books about community rules and community jobs and like reference books like dictionaries, right? So think about that. That's Jonas's whole life and his only experience with books. So what effect does that have on him? Well, when he steps into someone's house that actually has all kinds of storybooks and encyclopedias and novels and things like that, right? Then the effect is that Jonas is just blown away. He can't believe that many books exist. In fact, he has no idea what they're for, right? He doesn't even know what a storybook is. He thinks that they're all books about rules from other communities and things like that. And he has no idea that there's storybooks and comic books and all that stuff. So that was the effect that it had on Jonah. So here, Jonas, right? So here's the cause, right? The big event or the big thing. And what happened because of that is the effect, right? One more. Cause. Jonas has grown up in a community that never teaches people about love or feelings that people have for each other, right? That's one of the things that the community has banned, love between people. In fact, they take a pill to take away all attraction that people have for each other. And so, effect, what effect does that have on Jonas? Think about that for a second. What would you answer to that? Well, that effect that it's going to have, or that it has had, is when Jonas does have a little bit of a feeling for his friend Fiona right before he takes the pill. He's so confused. He has no idea why he's feeling that way for her, because he's never been taught about that or exposed to that. And no one ever talks about that in his family or community, that people have feelings for each other, because they've tried to get rid of love, right? So that what effect does that have on Jonas? He doesn't understand love or attraction or anything like that. Pretty crazy, right? So that's an example of cause and effect. And there's a lot of interesting causes and effects that happen to Jonas because of them in this book that we'll explore as the book continues to go along. So hopefully that's making some sense. Today, though, we're going to read chapter 11 from The Giver. So if you're in the black book, that's page 80. I think you'll be able to find it in the white book. I don't have my white book right next to me right now. So here goes chapter 11. Follow along. As always, remember that makes you a better reader. Even if somebody else is reading for you, if your eyes are following with the word, you're becoming a better reader and picking up vocabulary words and practicing reading in your head too. So follow along with me. Here we go. Jonas felt nothing unusual at first. He felt only the light touch of the old man's hands on his back. So remember, he's laying there, about to get a memory. He tried to relax, to breathe evenly. The room was absolutely silent, and for a moment Jonas feared that he might disgrace himself now on the first day of his training by falling asleep. Then he shivered. He realized that the touch of the hands felt suddenly cold. At the same instant, breathing in, he felt the air change, and his very breath was cold. He licked his lips, and in doing so, his tongue touched the suddenly chilled air. It was very startling, but he was not at all frightened now. He was filled with energy, and he breathed again, feeling the sharp intake of frigid air. Now, too, he could feel cold air swirling around his entire body. He felt it blow against his hands where they lay at his sides and over his back. The touch of the man's hands seemed to have disappeared. Now he became aware of an entirely new sensation. Pinpricks? No, because they were soft and without pain. Tiny, cold feather-like feelings peppered his body and face. He put out his tongue again and caught one of the dots of cold upon it. It disappeared from his awareness instantly. But he caught another and another. The sensation made him smile. So he's experiencing snow for the first time, right? He's catching snowflakes. One part of his consciousness knew that he was still lying there on a bed in the annex room. Yet another separate part of his being was upright now, in a sitting position. And beneath him he could feel that he was not on the soft decorated bed covering at all, but rather seated on a flat, hard surface. His hands now held, though at the same time they were still motionless at his sides, a rough, damp rope. And he could see, though his eyes were closed, he could see a bright, whirling torrent of crystals in the air around him, and he could see them gather on the backs of his hands like cold fur. His breath was visible. Beyond, through the swirl of what he now somehow perceived was the thing the old man had spoken of, snow. He could look out and down a great distance. He was up high someplace. The ground was thick with furry snow, but he sat slightly above it on a hard, flat object. Sled, he knew abruptly. He was sitting on a thing called sled, and the sled itself seemed to be poised at the top of a long, extended mound that rose from the very land where he was. Even as he thought the word mound, his new consciousness told him hill. Then the sled, with Jonas himself upon it, began to move through the snowfall, and he understood instantly now that he was going downhill. No voice made an explanation. The experience explained itself to him. His face cut through the frigid air as he began the descent, moving through the substance called snow on the vehicle called sled, which propelled itself on what he now knew, without doubt, to be runners. Top of 82, by the way. Comprehending all of these things as he sped downward, he was free to enjoy the breathless glee that overwhelmed him. The speed, the clear cold air, the total silence, the feeling of balance and excitement and peace. Then, as the angle of incline lessened, as the mound, the hill, flattened nearing the bottom, the sled's forward motion slowed. The snow was piled now around it, and he pushed with his body, moving it forward, not wanting the exhilarating ride to end. Finally, the obstruction of the piled snow was too much for the thin runners of the sled, and he came to a stop. He sat there for a moment, panting, holding the rope in his cold hands. Tentatively, he opened his eyes, not his snow hill sled eyes, for they had been open throughout the strange ride. He opened his ordinary eyes, and he saw that he was still on the bed, that he had not moved at all. The old man, still beside the bed, was watching him. "How do you feel?" he asked. Jonas sat up and tried to answer honestly. "Surprised," he said after a moment. The old man wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Phew," he said. "It was exhausting. But even transmitting that tiny memory to you, I think it lightened me just a little. Do you mean you did say I could ask questions? The man nodded, encouraging his question. Do you mean that now you don't have the memory of it, of that ride on the sled anymore? That's right. A little weight off this old body. Top of page 83. But it was such fun. And now you don't have it anymore. I took it from you. But the old man laughed. All I gave you was one ride on one sled in one snow on one hill. I have the whole world of them in my memory. I could give them to you one by one 1,000 times and there would still be more. Are you saying that I mean we, could do it again? Jonas asked. I'd really like to. I think I could steer by pulling the rope. I didn't try this time because it was so new. The old man, laughing, shook his head. Maybe another day for a treat. But there's no time, really, just to play. I only wanted to begin by showing you how it works. Now, he said, turning businesslike, lie back down. I want to. Now, I'm going to pause there in the middle of 83 for a second just to talk about making sure what's happening is making sense to you, okay? So, again, this is a science fiction book, but the receiver can touch Jonas's back and literally, almost like a movie, give Jonas a really clear, vivid memory that he experiences almost like he's living it. And so the first receiver, the older guy, has all these memories stored in him of things that existed before the community was ever around, right? And it's his job to store them all so that the other people don't have to think about those things that could be bad, right? And so now Jonas, the new receiver, is going to have to get all these memories. That's what's going on. That's his job, right? That's why he's the receiver. He's the receiver of memories. Okay, middle of page 83. Jonas did. He was eager for whatever experience would come next, but he had suddenly so many questions. Why don't we have snow and sleds and hills, he asked. And when did we have in the past? Did my parents have sleds when they were young? Did you? The old man shrugged and gave a short laugh. Ha, no, he told Jonas. It's a very distant memory. That's why it was so exhausting. I had to tug it forward from many generations back. It was given to me when I was a new receiver, and the previous receiver had to pull it through a long time period too. But what happened to these things? Snow and the rest of it? Climate control. Snow made growing food difficult, limited the agricultural, the farming, periods, and unpredictable weather, top of 84, made transportation almost impossible at times. It wasn't a practical thing, so it became obsolete when we went to sameness. So notice there's another thing the community has gotten rid of, using fancy machines, maybe even a big dome or something, I'm not sure. They've gotten rid of weather, right? Because it's bad for farming to have really cold days or snowy days and travel and stuff, right? Isn't that crazy? So Jonas has no idea. Top of 84. And hills too, he added. They made conveyance of goods unwieldy. That means moving around hard, right? It's hard to go uphill. Trucks, buses slowed them down. So he waved his hand as if a gesture had caused the hills to disappear. Sameness, he concluded. Jonas frowned. I wish we had those things still, just now and then. The old man smiled. So do I, he said. But that choice is not ours. But sir, Jonas suggested, since you have so much power, the man corrected him. Honor, he said firmly. I have great honor. So will you. But you will find that that is not the same as power. Lie quietly now. Since we've entered into the topic of climate, let me give you something else. And this time I'm not going to tell you the name of it because I want to test the receiving. You should be able to perceive the name without being told. I gave away snow and sled and downhill and runners by telling them to you in advance. Without being instructed, Jonas closed his eyes again. He felt the hands on his back again, and he waited. Now it came more quickly, the feelings. This time the hands didn't become cold, but instead began to feel warm on his body. They moistened a little. The warmth spread, extending across his shoulders, up his neck, onto the side of his face. He could feel it through his clothed parts, too. A pleasant, all-over sensation, and when he licked his lips this time, the air was hot and heavy, top of 85. He didn't move. There was no sled. His posture didn't change. He was simply alone someplace out of doors, lying down, and the warmth came from far above. It was not as exciting as the ride through the snowy air, but it was pleasurable and comforting. Suddenly he perceived the word for it. Sunshine. He perceived that it came from the sky. Then it ended. Sunshine, he said aloud, opening his eyes. Good. You did get the word. That makes my job easier. Not so much explaining. And it came from the sky. That's right, the old man said, just the way it used to. So notice, somehow in this community, they must have artificial lights and everything. They don't even go out in the regular sun, right? Probably because it could cause sunburns and skin cancer and things, right? Pretty crazy, this community, isn't it? Anyways, before sameness, before climate control, Jonas added. The man laughed. You receive well and learn quickly. I'm very pleased with you. That's enough for today, I think. We're off to a good start. There was a question bothering Jonas. Sir, he said, The chief elder told me, well, she told everyone, and you told me too, that it would be painful. So I was a little scared, but it didn't hurt at all. I really enjoyed it." He looked quizzically at the old man. The man sighed. "I started you with memories of pleasure. My previous failure gave me the wisdom to do that." He took a few deep breaths. "Jonas," he said, "it will be painful, but it need not be painful yet." "I'm brave, I really am." Jonas sat up a little straighter. The old man looked at him for a moment. He smiled. "I can see that," he said. "Well, since you asked the question," top of page 86, "I think I have enough energy for one more transmission. Lie down once more. This will be the last today." Jonas obeyed cheerfully. He closed his eyes, waiting, and felt the hands again. Then he felt the warmth again, the sunshine again, coming from the sky of this other consciousness that was so new to him. This time, as he lay basking in the wonderful warmth, he felt the passage of time. His real self was aware that it was only a minute or two, but his other memory-receiving self felt hours pass in the sun. His skin began to sting. Restlessly, he moved one arm, bending it, and felt a sharp pain in the crease of his inner arm at the elbow. "Ouch," he said loudly, and shifted on the bed. "Ow," he said, wincing at the shift, and even moving his mouth to speak made his face hurt. He knew that there was a word, but the pain kept him from grasping it. Then it ended. He opened his eyes, wincing with discomfort. "It hurt," he told the man, "and I couldn't get the word for it." "It was sunburn," the old man told him. "It hurt a lot," Jonas said, "but I'm glad you gave it to me. It was interesting, and now I understand better what it meant that there would be pain." The man didn't respond. He sat silently for a second. Finally, he said, "Get up now. It's time for you to go home." They both walked to the center of the room. Jonas put his tunic back on. "Goodbye, sir," he said. "Thank you for my first day." Top of 87. The old man nodded to him. He looked drained and a little sad. "Sir," Jonas said shyly. "Yes, do you have a question?" "It's just that I don't know your name. I thought you were the receiver, but you say that now I'm the receiver, so I don't know what to call you." The man had sat back in the comfortable upholstered chair. He moved his shoulders around as if to ease away an aching sensation. He seemed terribly weary. "Call me the giver," he told Jonas. So you might have noticed as I was talking about Chapter 10's worksheet, I kept using that name, the giver. I apologize. That wasn't actually a name that he gave himself till right now, but he's giving the memories, right? So from now on, we'll probably refer to him as the giver quite a bit, and Jonas is the receiver. Hopefully this book is getting really interesting for you. Right about now is when I remember reading it for the first time and really getting hooked and like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. It's a little bit of science fiction for you, but kind of interesting, right? To see a kid who's never experienced a lot of these things get all these memories, and we'll see how that affects Jonas in the chapters to come. By the way, almost forgot a code word for today. We're going with hot dog bun today. I forget who suggested that one, but we're going with it. Hot dog bun is our code word for today. Have a good day, guys.